I'm Storm Tracker meteorologist Rochelle J. Here's an 8 p.m. Tuesday, July 2nd update on Hurricane Beryl. It has caused, unfortunately, a good amount of damage in some Caribbean islands, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines and areas of Grenada and other countries as well. So here's a look at Hurricane Beryl. We're looking at the latest advisory. As of this evening, the 8 p.m. advisory, we still have a very strong hurricane out there, an upper level, a high grade Category 4 storm. Now, the storm has weakened. It was up to 165 miles an hour, and now it's down to 150. So still a very strong Category 4 hurricane. You can see Haiti, the Dominican Republic, getting some of those outer layers. The eye of the storm, however, is south right now of Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but we're watching for areas back off to the west of those areas. But we still do have a tropical storm warning for southern Haiti and the Dominican Republic and a hurricane watch for some southern areas of Haiti, but that's covered by that warning, that tropical storm warning. There's also a hurricane warning in place for Jamaica as well as the Cayman Islands. So we'll be keeping an eye on those areas next. Let's look at the track. Still expecting this storm to continue to weaken as it's moving through the Caribbean Sea. But there's a possibility we could see Beryl make landfall somewhere in Jamaica during the day on Wednesday as a Category 3 hurricane. We'll keep an eye on this. I want you to know the cone only shows you the projected locations of the center of the storm. It's not showing the size of the storm, but where the center, that eye, could be. Now, the eye of Beryl is south of Hispaniola right now, but we're still seeing impacts in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So keep that in mind as I'm showing you this cone. So potential for landfall, not certain, in Jamaica. And then we'll also watch Beryl continuing to weaken, but still a hurricane, move past the Cayman Islands. Then as we go into later this week, on Friday, we could see good likelihood that we will see Category 1 hurricane making landfall on the Yucatan Peninsula. It'll weaken even more than it already was as it moves over land. Then it'll re-strengthen somewhat, according to the National Hurricane Center, and then it's going to move off to eastern Mexico, possibly making a landfall somewhere in eastern Mexico, if not southern Texas. Once we get that far out, there's a good deal of uncertainty as we are talking about the projected location of where that storm could go. So as far as impacts go, we're talking about Category 3 hurricane, but depending on where an area might be impacted by a hurricane, there will be higher impacts and maybe some not as high, but still damaging impacts. So what we do, we look at the center of the storm. Imagine the storm is moving from the bottom of your screen to the top. So that's the storm motion. We cut this into fours, into quadrants, and it's that right front quadrant where we'll be watching for the potential of max storm impacts. Take it back to that track that we just looked at. We could see some of those front right areas in Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and some areas of the Yucatan Peninsula over the next few days. Now, when we look at the front left, we're still talking about heavy rain and storm surge. Back left has the, quote, weakest winds, but when we're talking about hurricanes, we can still see damage from what's considered not as strong winds. The back right has strong winds and strong gusts as well. So anywhere, you don't really want to be in any of these quadrants, but it's that front right quadrant that we watch just a little bit more closely for the maximum storm impacts. Now, here's a look at the spaghetti model plots. Decent consensus on the direction, but not so much on the exact location of the center of Beryl. So there's a wide spread, and it becomes even wider, much more uncertainty as we go toward the weekend and early next week. We know the general direction where the storm is going to move, but exact location is still somewhat up in the air. So let's take a look, break this down between the American model, which will be in a blue color, and the European model, which will be in an orange. Now, the GFS, the American model, has always had this storm at a stronger level than the European over the past few days of putting out forecasts for Hurricane Beryl, and it continues to do so as we go into the middle of this week. Now, the GFS wants to have a landfall somewhere in southern Jamaica. Maybe the European wants to try that as well, but you're seeing more of these little circles. That's indicating this particular model is calling for a stronger storm because we have, these are called isobars. These lines, they're lines of equal pressure. So where you have those more densely packed, that's where we're talking about a stronger storm, a stronger system that's moving through. So the GFS is calling for a stronger system on Wednesday afternoon to make landfall somewhere in southern Jamaica. Now we'll pass the Cayman Islands and we head toward Friday morning. Still a stronger storm according to the GFS, but weaker than it was during the middle of the week for this forecast. Somewhere around some of those resort locations of the Yucatan Peninsula. So I put Cancun and Tulum on there just to show you that we could have, or probably will have, some impacts there. And then look at the spread between these two. We're looking at the European model somewhere into eastern Mexico, and then the GFS maybe trying to bring it a little bit north, maybe into some southern areas of Texas. So much more uncertainty during the early part of next week. We're looking at July 8th at this point here. So how much rain are we talking from this system? Some areas could be seeing 6 or more inches of rain as we're going between Tuesday and into early next week, so going toward July 8th. I just took it out a week. So this is the European, which had it as a weaker storm, but still bringing 4, 5, 6+ inches of rain to some areas of the Caribbean. So I put Kingston there. Hard to see the Cayman Islands, but you're seeing through the Yucatan, we've got some of those heavier totals. And very similar story with the GFS, although it has it as a stronger storm. So we're seeing a few more areas with maybe a little bit more rainfall projected from one model to the other. But the general consensus is we're looking at heavy rain as one of the impacts from Beryl as it moves through. And that continues even here into southern Texas and northeastern areas of Mexico, where the GFS wanted to bring that storm, remember, a little bit farther to the north. So some of those heavier rainfall totals, according to this model, may come right along the border between Texas and Mexico. So we'll keep an eye on exactly where that heavy rain does set up. But it does look like areas like Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, and the Yucatan Peninsula will be dealing with heavy rain. Now, as far as wave heights go, that's another threat that we're watching. And even though the center of the storm is south of Hispaniola, we're still going to be dealing with the potential for some very high waves on the south coast of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So we've got the legend here at the top of your screen. We're looking at maybe 12+ feet of potential wave height for some southern areas of Haiti and the Dominican Republic as we're going into early on Wednesday morning. Jump it ahead just a bit. We're starting to see some of those higher waves toward eastern Jamaica. Now, Jamaica is likely going to be dealing with some very high waves through the day on Wednesday. So I've jumped it ahead now to Thursday at 5 a.m. Around Jamaica, still the potential for 5+ foot waves around the island. But I stopped it here because this is the Cayman Islands in this area. They have the possibility for seeing some of those higher wave heights early on Thursday morning and probably a little bit later on Thursday as well. By early Friday, we're looking at the eastern areas of the Yucatan Peninsula, so some of those resort areas. Before Friday night, it heads into the Bay of Campeche and eventually does push toward the border between Texas and Mexico. So that's how the wave heights could be moving as we're going through the next 5 or so days toward the weekend. So looking at the intensity trend of Beryl, this storm held such high amounts of intensity for a very long time. It became a Category 5 hurricane with the 11 p.m. advisory on Monday evening. And it kept around that same strength, if not strengthening, as we moved overnight Monday into Tuesday morning and through much of the day on Tuesday as well. And one reason for that is because of the sea surface temperatures. They are abnormally high for this time of year. The warmth of the water out in the Atlantic, the Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, this is what we would typically expect during the peak of hurricane season, which isn't until September, heading into early October. So this is what we're dealing with now. This is a loop. I've put Beryl on just to show you where that storm is and the types of waters that it's moving into. So I've taken this box here. The average water temperature in this box, 84 degrees. Now, for a system to feed off of and become stronger and to be conducive to storm development, it only has to have water temperatures of 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So we've got an average temperature in the mid-80s and maximum water temperature in the upper 80s. And that's the same types of water temperatures that this storm is moving out of as we look toward the chain of Caribbean islands that it's already moved through, so areas like Barbados, Grenada, going down towards Trinidad and Tobago. So this storm has been feeding off of these abnormally warm temperatures on the sea surface, but not just that, but this is something that's called heat potential, which shows you the heat content below the surface. So how far down does that warm water go? And Beryl has had a good amount of that as it's moved away from those islands in the far eastern Caribbean and into the Caribbean Sea. It continues to have that, so that helps Beryl maintain that higher level of intensity, those higher wind speeds becoming, or keeping it as a stronger hurricane. And it'll continue to have that as it moves through the Caribbean Sea. However, it's also moving into an area of wind shear. And wind shear, that's a change of wind direction or wind speed as you go from the surface higher up in the atmosphere. So I've just highlighted some unfavorable areas of wind shear, and that's exactly what Beryl is moving into. So that's what's going to continue this weakening trend that we've seen over the past few advisories for Beryl, and that is good news, but it's still on the strong side. It's coming from a Category 5 hurricane, so it's going to take some time for this to weaken substantially. So again, we're watching the potential impacts from a Category 2 to 3 hurricane in the Cayman Islands and for Jamaica as well. But thankfully, it is moving into this more unfavorable environment. But the wind shear and the warm water temperatures are kind of battling, but it looks like the forecast is for the wind shear to win out, and Beryl will start to weaken, or continue to weaken, I should say. So that should say 2024 Atlantic hurricane season. For this year, we've had so far 3 named storms, 1 hurricane and 1 major hurricane. Both of those last 2 categories are for Beryl. We've also had Alberto as well as Chris in the Atlantic already so far. So we're running ahead of schedule, and those very warm water temperatures are in large to blame for this active season and some of these storms intensifying how they have. So elsewhere in the tropics, of course, we've talked about Beryl this entire video, but we've also had this other region that had a higher chance of tropical development, but now is down to about a 20% chance, a low chance within the next 7 days. And unfortunately, even if this doesn't get a name, it looks like it could bring some gusty winds, some more storms, some more rain to some of the areas that dealt with Beryl just about a day or so ago, depending on when you're watching this earlier this week. So we have to watch out for that. Regardless of if it becomes a tropical depression, tropical storm, there are still going to be impacts coming to these same Caribbean islands that had to deal with Beryl not that long ago, and they're just starting the cleanup in some of those islands.